Hey guys, this is Potentially Unwanted again. I'm a little behind due to 3D printer issues, so we're going to talk about the things that I fixed on my Ender3. So this is my Ender3. It's highly modified, and I would highly recommend this 3D printer if your end goal is to mod it. Now, it's not an Ender3 version 2. This is a version 1 that I got a few years ago. It's so old that the first upgrade that I did for this 3D printer was an MKS Gen L. This recent upgrade I did was just for fun, just to see what printing with a direct drive system is like. And it really racked my brain every step of the way. I had to troubleshoot things that I hadn't seen before, and it was fun to an extent, but it was pretty frustrating as well. I'm not the most experienced 3D printer. In fact, I've only worked with this one, but I'm fairly confident in my abilities to troubleshoot. I think my first mistake was that I did 2 upgrades at once. I attached a Microswiss direct drive extruder and a SKR Mini version 2. I probably should have gotten the SKR Mini working first for a few weeks and then added the Microswiss. But I was impatient and I didn't realize that the SKR Mini version 2 didn't even accept the screen for my MKS out of the box. So I had to wait a few weeks for a screen to come in. I couldn't get the screen to connect. It actually took me a few days to realize that I had to have the TFT and the EXP3 cables plugged in at the same time. I thought it would just work with the EXP3 cable, but I guess that's not how that works anymore. The only problem with the motherboard that I've had since then is that when I was rerouting my cables, because I wanted to add a cable chain mount to the X gantry, I added my BL Touch, and I think I messed up my 5V and ground pins in the process. I thought I had broken my BL Touch entirely, but I plugged in the 5V and ground to a Raspberry Pi and it turned on. So my thought was that it should at least turn red when attached to the Ender3. So I plugged in the 5V and ground into the NeoPixel headers on the SKR, and my BL Touch is operational again. But my Ender3 feels a little jankier than it was before. Now that just leaves us with the Microswiss direct drive. The first issue was that I was getting random layer shifting, and I couldn't figure out why. I started watching my 3D printer, and I noticed that the layer shifting happened right after exiting travel speed. It would do an entire layer perfectly fine. Then it would move 150 millimeters per second to the original position, and it would stop 2 millimeters or so away from where it was supposed to. And that's when I realized that the weight that I'd added to the Ender3 added so much additional inertia to the extruder that it couldn't stop in time to make the next layer. So what I did there was lower the travel speed in my Cura settings to 50 millimeters a second instead of the default 150 millimeters per second. That was a particularly annoying issue to troubleshoot because a lot of places online tell you that it can be external factors that cause the header to shift. In particular, people tend to blame the filament spool for causing the motor to stutter. This issue can also be caused by a loose X gantry cable, but that wasn't my issue. I'd even gone as far as to think that it could have been my table because it's kind of wobbly. So I thought that the wobble of the table might have caused the extruder nozzle to stutter while it was moving. But in this case, it was actually my own fault for adding a direct drive to my system. So here's the last problem, and see if you can guess what the issue is, because it took me forever to figure this one out. Okay, so the problem here was that the direct drive was rubbing the motor on the Z-axis. I had over tightened the X gantry, and it was actually pulling the drive back and causing the motor to rub the X-axis pull when it was hitting the end stop. On this particular direct drive, it seems like it needs to be a little bit looser on the gantry, because gravity will actually just pull the head forward away from the Z-axis. Otherwise, you can actually tighten it so much that there's not enough gap there for the motor to clearance. All right. So on a different note, I've started on a cyberdeck, and I hope that later this week I can put out a video making the keyboard using a Raspberry Pi Pico. It's going to be a 40% ortho board, and the build plate is what you've been watching my 3D printer print this whole time. I really think that these cyberdecks sort of miss out on the keyboard side of things. So I'll leave you guys with these two key build plates that I've been using for testing, set to royalty-free YouTube music.